Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel for another video. For those of you who are new here, my name is Madison and I read a lot of books. I read a lot of books and I listen to a ton of audiobooks. And I was recently speaking with a friend who watches my videos and reads a lot of my book recommendations. And she's in a similar stage of life to me. You know, mid-30s, kids, wife, running a household, working a job, doing all these things. And she expressed something to me that I get honestly all the time. It is, I would love to get into reading. I wish I could read as much as you do. I just can't do it. I'm just too busy. I used to read a ton when I was younger. And since becoming an adult and becoming so busy, I just can't do it. And I'm telling you guys, I get this all the time. And I was in a similar mindset for most of my adulthood. So real quick, I put together some just like tips and tricks and also some mindset things that I've switched along the way to become a non-reader to an avid reader. And I wanted to share them with you guys. But before I get into that, I wanted to just share a quick Reader's Digest version of my reading story and how I became someone who never read to someone who reads a lot. So I grew up in a household that read. My mom read out loud to us. My mom is an avid reader. My mom still reads all the time. And that was modeled to us growing up. And so in my home growing up, if you were bored, you read a book. If you were happy, you read a book. If you were hungry, you read a book. I mean, we were just a family that read. So I was very, very fortunate to be brought up in a household that really emphasized reading and how important it was. So I did read a lot all the way up to about high school age. That's when I read Chronicles of Narnia and Lord of the Rings for the first time and Harry Potter. You know, I am a 35-year-old woman. I'm a millennial in the flesh. So of course I was raised on Harry Potter. But really when I got to about high school age, it just flatlined. And then I got married in my very early 20s. And we didn't have any cable. We didn't have any internet in our home. We didn't have smartphones like you guys. We were young and we were so poor. And so in my very early 20s, I got back into reading. And during that phase, I just read, you know, stuff that people in their early 20s read. And I went through about a 2-year phase of, again, being a pretty avid reader. But then I went on probably about a 10-year hiatus of reading nothing. I did read some personal development books, nonfiction, sprinkled in throughout the years, but still not to the amount that I would call myself a reader per se. 10 years reading nothing. And then all of a sudden, I mean, as the story goes, for those of you who know me, I was a big Game of Thrones fan. And when Game of Thrones was in between seasons, I did read A Song of Ice and Fire. I loved it. I loved that not only the story was magical and absolutely captivated me, and I love everything about it, but not only was it the story, but it really gave me something in common with one of my brothers. And that connection through reading really made us closer. And that's one thing I love about reading that I'm going to get to here in a minute with my notes for my tips and tricks. But I love how reading does bring people together. But that was the catalyst. It was not that I really wanted to get back into reading, but I wanted to have something to talk about with one of my younger brothers. And he was into reading fantasy books. I already liked Game of Thrones, so I thought these are a perfect place to start. Well, that was several years ago still. And then cut to the ending of the show. And I knew that I was going to be sad that it was over. I knew that I was going to want to refill that slot of interest in my life with something else because the show didn't end quite how I wanted. But even if it had a perfect ending, I still would have had a void because I was super into Game of Thrones, you guys. I was all about like the chat rooms and the theories and I even adminned a large Game of Thrones Facebook group. It was so important to me. And when I felt like the end was coming, I thought, okay, you're going to have to fill that slot in your life with something else so you don't get really sad when it's over. And that's when I decided to go back to reading. And Guys, it's been so fun. It's been about 2 years since I've been back to reading, and I want to share with you guys, like I said, some mindset tricks as well as just some practical tips to get back into reading as an adult. Or maybe you've never been a reader and you thought, this is the time, like I want to be one of those people who reads books. So last night after my conversation with my friend, I did jot down some thoughts I had, and I want to share them with you guys because I feel like it's a very common a thought that a lot of people have, is that they wish to be a reader. They wish that they were that person who always had a book with them, that, was just like checking things off of their book wish list, but they just feel like because they're busy, because they have kids or a career or they're in college or whatever it is, that they just can't be a reader. And I can totally relate to that because I felt like those excuses weren't really excuses, but reasons. And I think they're pretty valid on paper, but there are ways around it if it's something that's really important to you. So that is my first tip, is to don't feel like you have to want to. If you want to read books, by all means, we want you. You are welcome here, and there's so much space for you. And I don't care if you're 15 or you're like 78 years old, like it's never too late to just become a reader. But please don't feel like you have to. I do feel like there is somewhat of a stigma that, like, if you're intelligent or if you're disciplined, that you read. And I don't think that's necessarily true. So make sure that's something that you actually want to do, because you don't have to want to read. But I hope you want to read, because like I said, there's so much space for you here. There are so many amazing books that will just absolutely transport you. And that's what I love about book, is that they are magical. The world kind of sucks sometimes, because sometimes everyday life becomes predictable and mundane, and books are an amazing escape. So I do hope you want to, but that's my first thing, is if you don't feel like you actually want to, you don't have to. And if you don't want to now, you may very well want to read in a decade or next year. So don't push it if it's not something you really want to do, because as I'm about to tell you, it does take a little bit of discipline and a little bit of work in a way to train your mind to become a reader versus a different hobby. So my next tip, and this is something I've been feeling a lot of lately, coming from myself and from others, some friends in the bookish community, and some friends, like I said, that are still outside of the bookish community but are hoping to get in, is don't spend time regretting all the time you spent not reading, okay? So all the time you spent not reading, you were doing other things that you love to do. You were watching TV shows, you're going to concerts, you were watching movies, you're cooking, you were, spending time with your family, collecting cool hobbies, being a sports fan. All of these things are totally valid and worthwhile. And as long as you are having fun doing other things, then there's no sense in regretting all the time you spent not reading. Sometimes I feel it myself. I'm like, oh my gosh, I now know that there are like thousands of books that I really, really wish to read, and I wasted a whole decade not reading a page. But the thing is, I was doing other things during that time, and they were super fun. They made me who I am today, and I don't regret any of that time I spent indulging in other hobbies, because it's all fun and it's all good. So don't live with any regrets, and also don't let people make you think that reading is some sort of superior hobby. That is a reading gatekeeper, and they are not welcome here. So I am a big fan of all the hobbies, and so all the time you spent doing other things, it was time well spent. And if you want to switch gears to become a reader, now's a great time to do it. Okay, my next practical tip. This may sound obvious, but I don't think it is once you really get into it. Read what you want to read, okay? I don't read a lot of classics. A lot of the things that people are like, oh, what? You've never read Jane Austen or, whatever. I don't want to. And there are going to be books that people recommend to you and people make you think are must reads, or in order to have any clout as a reader, it's like earning your stripes or something. Sure, I mean, you might get to the point where you trudge through some things to say you got there, but especially in the beginning, read what you want to read. I don't care if it's Twilight or Hunger Games or Captain Underpants. Read what you want to read, because all reading counts and all reading is good for you, and all reading is good for the continuation of the culture of reading. I feel like especially in the States, people aren't reading, and sometimes I wonder if it's because they're worried about what people will think if they're not reading something that's, famous or worthwhile or considered a classic or something that's super intellectual. Read what you want to read. The next thing is get plugged in with a book community. So whether it's through YouTube, Discord, Facebook groups, Bookstagram on Instagram, guys, there are so many people out there reading, and they want to be your friend. They want you in their community. They want to hear what you think about the books you loved, and they want you to share your opinions and stuff. And I would say that if it weren't for getting plugged in with a really strong, supportive, friendly book community, then I don't know that I would have stuck with reading and been so passionate about it for the past 2 years. But the friendships I've built along the way and just having someone to talk to about the books you're reading has been huge for me. Like I said, I don't know a ton of people who read in real life. I don't know, especially a lot of people who read the types of books I like to read. And so getting plugged in with people who were reading the same types of books and wanted to hear my opinion, and we're just happy to celebrate milestones with me, or, cheer me on as I'm trudging through a book that I may not love as much. It's been absolutely instrumental. So I cannot recommend it enough, and I will leave some links below for book communities that have been very supportive, other booktube channels that I've really enjoyed connecting with. So I cannot recommend that enough. It's great to have friends who are doing things with you to keep it fun and fresh and keep you engaged. The next thing is, I did say read what you want to read, but the other thing is try something new. I still try to do this at least a couple times a year. Grab something that for some reason is catching my attention, but I'm not even sure why. It's not the type of book I usually read. It's not in the genre I usually choose, but for some reason it's just kind of like calling to me, or maybe it's just like really, really, really popular, and Oprah and Reese Witherspoon and every other book club is suggesting it. Don't feel like you have to be super original all the time. Try something that's new to you, but already popular, okay? In my experience, I know people like to be like really original, off the beaten path, but in my experience, if something is very, very popular, it's popular for a reason, and that's because it's good and people as a whole generally love it. So try something that's new to you, but if you can't think of something to try, if you're low on recommendations, try something that seems to be wildly popular, because chances are it's popular for a reason. Also, if you followed my last tip of getting plugged in with a big book community, you're never going to be low on recommendations, but they might all start to seem kind of similar, because usually our communities stick together based on what we love. I love reading fantasy and sci-fi, and so within my bookish community, most of my recommendations and the things that my friends are reading that get me interested are going to be fantasy and sci-fi. But sometimes I like to peek out from my direct circle and see what everyone else is reading and try something new to me, because chances are if it's popular and other people are loving it, it's because it's really good. Okay, so here's something that's not going to be a surprise coming from me, but if you are similar to me in a phase of life, like maybe you're a mom or a dad, you're in your 30s, you're not a spring chicken anymore. Every time you sit down on the couch and get real cozy and grab a book, next thing you know, you are 6 pages in and totally asleep. That's because you're tired. You work really hard every day. You have a job. You have kids. Like I said, you go to college. You do all these grown-up things that are really necessary and really important. But damn it, by the time you sit down, you are so tired. And it's hard to allocate, especially in the beginning when you're trying to train yourself to get back into reading. It's hard to allocate that time this is for reading. And let's face it, it's so much easier to sit down on the couch and watch a movie. And like I mentioned before, there's nothing wrong with watching a movie, but if it's important to you and you really want to read that book, sometimes It's hard to make it through those first couple months when you're training yourself to get back into reading, because when you read and sit down, you're comfortable. And when you're comfortable, the fatigue sets in. So this leads me to the tip of audiobooks. Now, audiobooks are not for everyone. Not everyone is an auditory learner. As a mom, I have gotten very good at tuning out stuff I don't want to listen to and honing in on what I do want to listen to. Like, I can tune out, I'm hungry, he hit me, we're bored. I can tune out those things, but I can hone in on the house is on fire, or, I broke a bone. So that's kind of like a skill that parents have, I feel like. And it's worked out really, really well for audiobooking, because I'm able to tune out all the background noise and just hone in on my book. Not that you have to be a mom to be good at listening to audiobooks, but I think tuning out the background noise of my children has definitely contributed to it working out well for me. But audiobooking, you have to ask yourself, is it important to you that you are reading the book, or is it more important to you that you are consuming the content and the story is being delivered to you? If you are not necessarily super picky on the delivery of the story, then audiobooking is awesome, and I think it is totally valid, especially now that audiobooks are so easy to access and they're no longer abridged and stuff. They definitely still count in my books, and I'm glad that they count, because I'm telling you, probably 70% of everything I read in a month is via audiobook, because it's just what works best for my lifestyle. I audiobook when I'm doing chores. I audiobook when I'm mowing the lawn, cooking, folding laundry, doing carpool, commuting. I just audiobook all the time whenever I can. So it really does work as a cheat code for me, because that's just what fits in my life right now. I don't always have time to sit down on the couch or lay in bed and read a book. So audiobook, give it a try. I do have a video that explains some tips and tricks on getting used to audiobooking and finding out whether or not it'll be right for you. So check that out if you want to, but I definitely can't say enough good things about audiobooks. They make reading and reading a lot possible for me. My next tip is to read every day. In the beginning, it might look like 5 minutes, 10 minutes here and there, but read every single day. Make it a priority that you never skip a day for 30 days. Not only will it help become a habit, but it'll just help chisel away at those books. And, in the beginning, maybe your goal is 1 book a month, and that's perfect, absolutely perfect. And if you read a little bit every day, you will achieve that goal in no time. Just make sure it is a priority. I think that reading is kind of like exercise. Like I mentioned in the beginning, it took me a while to get back into it. I would always fall asleep on the couch, or I'd find myself lacking comprehension. I'd have to go back and reread. But just like exercising in the beginning, it's going to be cumbersome and you're going to be super sore and it feels like a massive chore every day. By the time you get into the habit of it, you're going to look back and be like, wow, look how much I've achieved. Look how, I can lift more now than I could a month ago. The same thing happens with reading. It's going to get easier. It's going to become more natural. You're going to be able to comprehend more as you're reading and read for longer times. Just don't give up or get frustrated those first few nights when you do fall asleep on the couch. The next thing is remember that it's not a race. There are downsides, I think, to being involved in a book community, because you're going to come across these people who read 15 books a month. Or even in the beginning, it could be intimidating to come across somebody who reads 4 big books in a month. Just know that it's not a race, and reading 1 book every month or 6 weeks is great. If that's what you want to do, if your goal is just to read, it doesn't really matter how much you're reading, as long as you're still having fun and you are, happy with the books you're reading, then just don't put any pressure on yourself to create a TBR, which is like a to be read list, or a reading schedule, or to try to keep up with somebody who's been reading their whole life. Read what feels comfortable to you, and just remember that it's definitely not a race. And sometimes this one can be the hardest pill to swallow, but realize that you're going to have to maybe restructure your schedule a little bit and reprioritize some things. Since becoming an avid reader, reading anywhere from 5 to 9 books a month, I don't watch as much TV. I hardly watch any TV at all, actually. I don't watch movies very often. And I used to watch tons of movies and TV. Like, there wasn't a new show on TV or a movie that I wanted to watch that I ever missed, because that was my main hobby at the time. But then I made the conscious decision that I wanted reading to be my main hobby. And since then, to be honest, since then, I have not watched a lot of TV or movies. And it's just a different phase of life for me right now. And the truth is, like I said, we are busy. We're adults, we're busy. And we can't do it all and still have a balanced home life, stay healthy, get enough sleep, all these things. So don't try to add reading on top of everything else, because it just won't be fun at that point. You are gonna have to restructure. And I haven't missed it, to be honest. It hasn't been a hard sacrifice. I look back and it was a sacrifice. I had to say no sometimes to maybe doing something with friends, or when everyone's sitting around talking about the newest show on HBO or whatever, I've got nothing to add now. And that's because I chose reading over my other hobbies. I don't regret it. I don't miss it, but it was a conscious shift in my priorities. So if you want to make reading a high priority, just remind yourself that there is only so much time in a day and nobody was meant to do it all. So please think about restructuring your priorities if you want this to be important, because it's supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to feel like one more thing you have to cross off the list. So honestly, those are my advice, my tips on getting back into reading, or like I said, getting into reading for the first time. I hope it was helpful and offered some insight. And please connect with me and let me know if you want to be pals. Like I said, reading to me is more than just about consuming stories. It's about the whole the community and the culture that I've become a part of, and the friendships I've made, and I just love talking to people about books that I love. So I hope you join me, and thank you so much for watching.